Craig, what is the backstep?
Well, it's a book we just put out. That's first of all. The backstep was a position. It was, if you were on a ladder truck way back in the day, you would ride on the side step. Or if you were on engine company, you'd ride the backstep. Or the tailboard was another term for it. It's more of like a regional thing. More of the Midwest, East Coast is where I've heard that it's from. In relation to the book, it's more of an idea. And the idea is that you can lead without rank. In the fire service and, law enforcement, they're paramilitary organizations. So you have a rank structure where you have the rank and file, right? The firefighters, the street police officers, the troops, and then you have the officers. In our department, it's lieutenants and captains, and then above that is battalion chiefs, and then deputy chief all the way up to the fire chief of the department. Traditionally, to have any sort of power, to have any sort of say-so in how your day-to-day was run, how fires were run.
Influence.
So influence. In order to have any influence at all, you had to promote and get some sort of stature that created automatic buy-in from people because they see some bugles on your shirt and they assume that you have put in the time, you have the information and education to make, good decisions. I personally have seen it where the person with the most influence on the rig has no rank at all. And I think that everyone in their department can picture at least one person who's like that.
I think the majority of crews have a person on their crew. That person that has the most influence is not a promoted person. Or that person on the crew that has the most influence is not the highest ranking person there. I think that's probably more normal than not.
Yeah, I think you just look at the sheer numbers, right? Like there's way more blue shirts than white shirts. So statistically, that would totally make sense, right? There are more leaders because the pool is bigger. And just because you promote doesn't necessarily make you a leader. It just makes you a manager. That's not to say that there aren't some incredible promoted officers, but they were probably incredible firefighters first. They just got the rank afterwards.
They were good backsteps before they promoted.
Correct. I can't think of a good officer who wasn't a great backstep. But just because you're in the back seat doesn't make you a backstep. I think that's an important differentiation.
Okay, so what kind of qualities does a backstep have? Like what things does a backstep do throughout his or her shift that makes them a backstep?
I think it's an overall mindset of what your job is. Sure, you have at least the way, we run things, your seat has certain assignments and you are going to go out and do those things. But my feeling is that your job as a backstep is to create more bandwidth for your officer by taking over as many duties as you can for that person.
A backstep, a prerequisite for this person is their skills are dialed in. They have mastered the basics. They've got plan A, B, and C for everything, right? So the backstep separates himself by the mentoring and the coaching that goes on, the overall social part of a crew.
What do you mean?
Well, station life, rig life, all that.
Like setting the tone.
Yeah, just setting the acceptable norms. Like this is the stuff that this crew is going to tolerate. This is the stuff that we're not going to tolerate. This is how we show up, from 8 a.m. on. This is what the day is going to be like. This, that type of stuff.
Right.
Not, I'm putting together training plans and we go out and train all the time. It's more complicated than that. It's being a mentor to the new guys. It's being able to challenge your officer to conversations of tactics and potentially administrative stuff. And when I say challenge, I mean being able to go to the officer and say, hey, guys are saying this or guys are thinking this. What do you think? Being able to have those maybe tougher conversations, but to a true backstep, that's not really a tough conversation. It's just what they do.
To go back to what you were saying about training and mentoring, it shouldn't be the officer's job to teach the new person how to force a door. It shouldn't be the officer's job to make sure that the rigs are cleaned and ready to go and, equipment looks the way that it should. That's all the backstep. That is all the people riding on that rig. That is not the officer's problem.
Take, for example, teaching a skill. I think if a backstep teaches the new guy forcible entry, it's way more effective that way. I personally like the scenario of backstep teaches new guy forcible entry, officer comes in at some point, does an evolution, and shows that he can do forcible entry as well.
Absolutely.
I much rather that than officer teaches forcible entry and the rest of the crew does it. I think it has a way bigger impact to the guy learning the skill to see it done, the former.
Well, I think it comes back to buy-in, right? So if you're an officer and I come to a station, you automatically have my attention, right? So I'll listen to what you have to say because of your rank. For someone to listen to someone without rank, there has to be this organic form of trust built. And so that when that person says something and then obviously show, like, here's the other important piece of this. It's you being in the same level of PPE that you expect that person to be in, right? So if we're doing forcible entry, whoever's teaching needs to be in full gear in SCBA, and they have to walk through the steps and they have to show that person that they know how to do it before they're going to listen to me. But as an officer, you could come out in shorts and a t-shirt and say, this is the Halligan. This is how we do things. I'm going to go inside, have fun practicing. That's not how you build that team. That's not how you build that trust. And then when the officer comes back out and shows that they know exactly how to do that task, that's one less thing the officer has to do, right? The backstep has built the trust. They have shown the standard of the crew, and then the officer comes out, smashes it, and then heads off.
So I could either come out and say, yep, he's teaching it right. This is what we do. And everybody goes, okay. Or the more effective way is I could just come out and do it. And then everybody, including the backstep and the new guy, knows, okay, well, this is the expectation. We're going to train in our gear and our SCBA, realistic conditions, and we're going to force this door, throw this ladder. And with actions, now the officer has shown this is the expectation. Much more clear than stating it, right? Because hearing it, it doesn't resonate as much as seeing it.
You're going to get to the same place, but...
I don't know if you get to the same place.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is whether you teach it or I teach it, they're going to learn the same thing, but you don't have to be out there for 2.5 hours. That's my job. That's the backstep's job. To put in that time because the officer has other stuff to deal with.
Well, I'll take you back to academy, right? When we're all going through an academy, the one I went through, skills and stations that you went to learn basics, there was a better learning environment when a firefighter was teaching it. And it wasn't by a fault of the officers. It just was when you add that rank, it's hard to relax.
Well, you don't feel comfortable making mistakes in front of an officer, but you feel more comfortable making mistakes in front of someone who's kind of on your level.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the other piece of the puzzle of being a backstep, and this is kind of what a big chunk of the book is how to identify 4 different styles of leadership and how to manage your manager. You go into a station when you have a real asshole for a leader, but you still want to make change because there's 7 or 8 other people in that station who want to get better, and there's one person who's the roadblock. So the book kind of goes through how to navigate all those different styles of leadership and still win. It certainly isn't the same tactic for each one. Anyone can go out and teach skills. Anyone can succeed in a environment that's set up for that, but it takes, I think, a real backstep, or some people have called it in the past the senior man, to be able to do that no matter who your officer is.
I think, though, you mentioned senior man. I think the back step is one spot higher than the senior man.
Well, you get the senior man spot just because of how many paychecks you had.
Yeah, and I think at some point the senior man has proven himself.
Yeah.
I believe that. But I think the back step takes it further. The back step manages the officer for the crew, so to speak. Is able to navigate those leadership styles like you talk about in the book, but also has that senior man presence.
Yeah, I think whenever I think of senior man, I think of competency.
Skills, competency, yeah.
Right.
Like
so
experience.
Yeah, like you have these, hey, you know what? Actually, that technique doesn't actually work, right? Like works great on the door prop, but because of X, Y, and Z, this situation doesn't work. Like those are senior man type insights.
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, as an officer, the senior man by far is the most valuable person on the crew.
They tend to be like a force multiplier.
Right. If you have a back step on the crew, you just won the lottery as an officer, I feel.
Why is that?
It's like we're all getting on this plane together, right? If I have a good back step, I can set the destination for way further than, say, just like the next city over, right? We can fly coast to coast or we can fly overseas with a back step. Otherwise, we're kind of limited to just kind of regional. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because you have to take care of everything.
Right. Instead of just flying the plane, I got to fly the plane.
Navigate.
And be the flight attendant, all that stuff. It's too much. I'm spread too thin.
I think this goes back to Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. He talks about the canvas strategy. Your job is to find canvases for other people to paint their masterpieces. In the case of the firehouse, it is my job to make the officer look great and give them the opportunity to go above and beyond their daily duties, right? So if the officer doesn't have to worry about stuff being out of service, or are the people getting trained, or are the inspections getting scheduled because the back step's taking care of all that, well, then they can free up some mental space to, hey, let me see if I can get some acquired structures. Let me see if I can take over a department-wide training that I know that our guys can handle. How can we test out that new rig instead of everybody else? They have the opportunity to make the place better because the back step's taking care of all of the bullshit. Not that it's not important, but that's kind of their job.
Thank you for listening to Lead Yourself, the podcast brought to you by Fit to Fight Fire.